All right, so starting with this problem, we first have to graph this positive 1, but then down root 3. So to find our r value, we would take 1, square it, negative root 3, square it. So we're going to get 1 plus 3, or a value of 4, square root of that. We're getting an r value equal to 2. And then to find our angle, if you want to fill that in, you can. You could use tangent. I think that some people don't like to use tangent on this one just because it has that root 3. But you can use tangent, cosine, sine. I'm going to use cosine here. Cosine of theta equals the adjacent side over the hypotenuse we just found. So I'm really looking for where in the fourth quadrant is my x value equal to 1/2. So note that that's going to be at 5 pi over 3. Now from there, we can rewrite this as 2 kiss 5 pi over 3. And then we're going to raise that to the 5th power. So we get 2 to the 5th kiss, and then we get 5 pi over 3 times 5. So we get 32 kiss 25 pi over 3. Now 25 pi over 3, we need to convert to something that is on the unit circle. So I can subtract 6 pi over 3, which is really 2 pi, but you're going to notice I'm going to have to do it a few times. I know that I'm going to have to do this at least 4 times because that would give me 24 pi over 3, leaving me with an additional pi over 3, which would fall on the unit circle. So to do this, I just thought about how many times I'd have to multiply by 6 pi over 3. 6 pi over 3 times what is going to get me close to 25 pi over 3 without going over. And then whatever it went over, or whatever, to get to 25 pi. What? This is the worst explanation ever. I think you guys know what to do on that. Going back, here we go. 32 kiss pi over 3. And then to get that in standard form, we are going to 32 cosine pi over 3 plus I sine pi over 3. So cosine of pi over 3 is going to be the 1/2, and then sine is root 3 over 2. So when I multiply by that by 32, I get 16 plus 16 root 3i. And then for the last problem on here, you will see similar situation where we have to convert to trig form first. So when I graph this, I would be right here in quadrant 1. My r squared is going to be 2 squared plus 2 squared, or 4 plus 4, 8. And then we're going to get an r value of the square root of 8. To be honest, I am okay leaving it unsimplified, but some teachers do simplify. Multiple choice question on a quiz or test might have it simplified. So just remember that you can break that down with a factor tree, or just knowing that 8 has a factor of 4, which is a perfect square. You can rewrite that as 2 root 2. From there, we can find our theta. Definitely going to use tangent on this one. And notice that I'm getting a tangent of theta equal to 1. Since I'm in the first quadrant, that would have to be at pi over 4. Now, from here, we're going to take what we just got, 2 root 2, and we are going to write kiss pi over 4, and we are going to raise that to the 6th power. So starting with the first part of this, if we want to take 2 root 2 and raise it to the 6th power, we'll talk about that in just a second. But then cosine pi over 4 times 6. I'll reduce this by dividing by 2. So I'll have this, let me just write it again. And this problem right here, so if you want to do this, we can technically do, and think of this as like 2 to the 1/2 power, times this 2 in the front. And you could combine this. If you think about it, this is really 2 to the first power times 2 to the 1/2 power, which is equivalent to 2 to the 3/2 power, because remember 1 can be written as 2 over 2. And when we add those exponents, we get 3 over 2, but then this is all to the 6th power. So when we multiply the exponents together, we're going to get 6 times 3, which is going to give us the 18 over 2. This is really going to equate to 2 to the 9th power. And then we can find that in our calculators. So we can get this 2 to the 9th power. Oh, sure, take your time. So we get 2 to the 9th power, which is giving me 512. And note, if you were allowed to use your calculator, you could have done 2 square root 2. Oops. And then you could have raised that to the 6th power, and you would have also gotten that. Just be careful, because non-calculator versus calculator, you would obviously not be allowed to use a calculator on some questions, and it's important to know how to do that without. But we still have to do this cosine 3 pi over 2 plus I sine 3 pi over 2. So notice that the cosine of 3 pi over 2 would be 0, and the sine would be -1. So this time the real part goes away, but then we're going to have this imaginary part left over, so we'll get -512i. And that would be your final answer. So please email me with any questions.